The rain began the way bad news always does, quietly. Then, all at once. By the time Jack Calloway reached the bus shelter on Mercer Street, his jacket was already soaked through at the shoulders, the cheap nylon clinging to his back like a second skin that didn't quite fit. He pulled his hood down and shook the water from his hair, checked his phone out of habit, and found what he always found: a battery at 11% and no messages that mattered. He turned the phone over in his hand, the way he sometimes did, looking at the dark screen, and then he put it back in his pocket. He was 34 years old. He had been 34 years old for 6 months. And in those 6 months, he had not once felt like it. The shelter was a narrow aluminum frame, with 3 walls and a plastic roof that the rain drummed against like fingers on a desk. A woman in a nurse's scrubs stood at the far end, staring at something on her phone, with the tight, private expression of someone reading disappointing news. A teenager sat on the bench, with headphones the size of satellite dishes clamped over his ears. Neither of them looked up when Jack stepped inside. He angled himself into the narrow, dry space between the teenager and the shelter's wall, and watched the rain come down in the orange-lit street. The kind of hard, steady rain that makes every car sound like it's moving faster than it is. That was fine. Jack had grown accustomed to being unremarkable. He worked maintenance at the Hillcrest apartment complex, on the east side, 12 buildings, 4 floors each, a rotating list of complaints that never seemed to shorten no matter how many leaky faucets he fixed or how many light fixtures he replaced. He was good at the work, not passionate about it, not proud of it in any chest-swelling way, but good at it in the functional sense. He showed up. He diagnosed the problem correctly. The first time more often than not, and he fixed what needed fixing without requiring anyone to manage him or check on his progress. His supervisor, a red-faced man named Dennis, who communicated primarily through sighs, had started scheduling Jack for the Saturday overnight shift 3 weeks running. Jack hadn't asked why. He suspected it was because he never pushed back. And men who never pushed back were useful in the way that old furniture is useful. Always available. Never quite appreciated. Never replaced, because nobody ever stopped to imagine what might go in their place. He earned $19 an hour. After rent, after the payment on his truck, a 2012 Tacoma, with a manifold leak he kept meaning to have someone else look at after the electric bill and the groceries, and the single six-pack he allowed himself on Friday nights. As a small, private ceremony of survival, he was left with a number that didn't quite reach comfort, but cleared the floor of desperation. He was not poor the way hunger is poor. He was poor the way loneliness is poor. A slow, internal kind of poverty that doesn't show on the outside, that you could live inside for years without any external observer detecting it, the kind that leaves no visible marks except the particular quality of your silences and the specific angle at which you stand in rooms where you don't expect anything to happen. He was thinking about this, vaguely, the way you think about things you've already made peace with, when he heard it. A sound, thin and wet, half swallowed by the rain, the specific sound of a child crying when they have been crying long enough that the urgency has gone out of it, and what remains is just the steady leaking of distress, like a tap that has been left on. He turned. In the far corner of the shelter, tucked into the angle where the side wall met the back wall, so small she had been invisible when he stepped in, sat a little girl. She was maybe 5 years old, maybe 6. Her hair was dark and plastered against her cheeks in wet streaks. She wore a yellow raincoat over a white dress, and the raincoat was still buttoned neatly, every button, all the way up to the chin, which told him that someone had dressed her with care before this night went wrong. She had her knees pulled to her chest and her arms wrapped around them, and she was crying not the loud, demanding cry of a child seeking an audience, but the quiet, exhausted cry of a child who has already been frightened for a very long time and has run out of the particular energy that frightened crying requires. Nobody was looking at her. The nurse was still reading her phone. The teenager was still sealed inside his music. 2 men in business suits had stepped into the shelter while Jack's attention was elsewhere and were talking to each other in low, rapid voices about something to do with a client meeting. The phrases, closing date, and liability window floated past him, and their eyes slid over the corner where the small girl sat the way. Eyes slide over anything that isn't part of the story you're already in. Rain drummed on the plastic roof. The light from the street lamps lay in orange pools on the wet asphalt outside. And in the shelter, the fluorescent tube overhead buzzed with a faint, irregular frequency, like something that needed replacing. Nobody was looking at her. Jack stood still for a moment. He was aware, with a precision that came from being a man alone in the world, of exactly how this could go wrong. He was a stranger, a large one, at that 6'1", broad through the shoulders, wearing a work jacket that had seen better days, and carrying nothing that would make him look trustworthy to a frightened child or a suspicious adult. He knew what people thought when they saw a man like him approach a child like her. He had read enough news stories to know the calculation people ran in their heads and the verdict they arrived at before a single word was spoken. He looked around the shelter again. Still nobody else. He took a breath. Then he walked to the opposite end of the shelter and crouched down, putting himself at her eye level, 2 full arms' lengths away. He kept his hands visible and his voice low. The way you approach something small and easily startled. "Hey," he said quietly. "Are you lost?" The girl looked up. Her eyes were very large, very dark, and very direct, the kind of eyes that haven't yet learned to be guarded, that look at the world without the protective film that adults spend years applying. She studied him for a moment with the clear, assessing gaze that small children use when they're deciding whether an adult is safe, a gaze that is somehow more honest than anything adults do with their faces, because it isn't performing anything, not reassurance, not openness, just pure evaluation. Then she said, in a voice small and precise, "I can't find my mom." Her name was Lily. She was 5 3/4, she specified, in a tone that made it clear the 3/4 were not negotiable. She had been waiting at the shelter, for she held up both hands and looked at her fingers for a moment, a really, really long time. She did not know her phone number. She knew her address sort of, but what she produced when pressed was the white house near the big light, by the park with the fountain that isn't on anymore. She did not appear to be in immediate danger. Only in the ordinary, wrenching danger of being very small and very alone in the rain at 9:30 at night. Jack called the non-emergency police line. He was on hold for 4 minutes. When someone answered, he explained the situation in careful, precise language. A found child. A bus shelter on Mercer. No injuries. No sign of the parent. The dispatcher told him a unit would be by when one was available. The way she said it, evenly and without urgency, suggested that when one was available could mean 15 minutes or 45. He looked at Lily. She had stopped crying. She was watching him with that direct, evaluating gaze. "Are you a police?" she asked. "No," he said. "I fix things." She considered this. What kind of things? Sinks, lights, doors that don't close right. She nodded, as though this were perfectly satisfactory. "Our door doesn't close right sometimes," she said. It makes a noise like she made a low, grinding sound in the back of her throat that was so accurate and so unexpected that Jack almost smiled. Daddy used to fix it. Jack filed the word "used to" and said nothing. He had taken off his jacket, the good one, the waterproof one, not the nylon one that had failed him, and arranged it around her shoulders while they waited. It drowned her completely, the hem pooling on the wet concrete. And she had sat very still while he wrapped it around her, as though she understood that this was a gesture requiring dignity on her part. 20 minutes passed. The nurse left. The businessman left. The teenager, without removing his headphones, glanced at them once and then looked away. The rain did not stop. Lily had stopped asking about her mother in the direct, verbal way and started doing it in the other way, the way children communicate distress without words, pressing her shoulder against Jack's arm and watching the street with a searching, concentrated attention that was painful to see in someone so small. He called the line again. Still no unit available. He left his name and number. "We could walk," Lily said. Jack looked at her. "To your house? It's not that far," she said, with the authority of someone who has never actually navigated the distance alone in the rain at night. "It's by the park." With the fountain. He knew the park. Fairview, about 6 blocks east. Working-class neighborhood that had tipped slightly upward in recent years. New paint on old houses. The occasional Tesla in a driveway that still needed resurfacing. 10 minutes on foot, in normal conditions. He thought about waiting. He thought about Lily's shoulder against his arm. That small, involuntary lean. He thought about the police dispatcher's evenly paced voice. "Okay," he said. "But you hold my hand the whole way." She took his hand immediately, with both of hers, and did not let go. They walked in the rain. Jack held an umbrella he'd found collapsed and forgotten on the shelter's back, railing someone's abandoned property, now in service, and held it tilted toward Lily, so that she stayed mostly dry beneath its edge. He got wet. He was already wet. It didn't seem like a meaningful sacrifice under the circumstances. Lily talked. Not nervously, not compulsively, but with the steady, matter-of-fact narration of a child who is accustomed to adults listening. She told him about her teacher, whose name was Miss Harrigan, and who could do a cartwheel even though she was old. She told him about her best friend, whose name was Priya, who had a dog named Biscuit that was not very good at sitting. She told him about a book she was reading, a chapter book, she emphasized, not a picture book about a girl who lived inside a lighthouse. Jack listened. He found, to his own faint surprise, that he was genuinely listening, not in the half-attentive way of an adult humoring a child, but in the way you listen when something is briefly making the world feel less complicated than it usually is. "You live by yourself?" Lily asked, in the tone of someone who has observed something and is seeking confirmation. Jack looked down at her. "What makes you think that?" She shrugged. "You don't have anyone waiting." He didn't answer that directly. "How do you know?" "Because," she said simply, "people who have someone waiting walk faster." He didn't know what to say to that. So he said nothing. And they walked the next half-block in a silence that was somehow comfortable. The park appeared on their left. Iron fence, bare trees, the small circular fountain that was indeed not on. Its basin holding a flat sheet of rainwater that reflected the streetlights in wavering orange lines. Lily guided him right at the next corner, then left, then said, "There," with the quiet satisfaction of someone who was right about something and knew it. The house was not what he expected. It was set back from the street behind a short stone path, 2 stories, white clapboard siding that even in the dark and the rain looked freshly maintained, warm light in the downstairs windows, a black door with a brass knocker shaped like a ring, and beside it, a narrow planter with actual living plants in it, which in October in this climate represented either considerable effort or considerable money. A BMW in the driveway, current model. Lily was already pulling him up the path, both her hands still wrapped around one of his, moving with the urgency of someone arriving home after a very long journey. He barely had time to notice that his heart had begun, for no reason he could immediately identify, to beat faster. He knocked 3 times, because 1 seemed insufficient, and 4 seemed excessive. He could hear movement inside, quick footsteps, the particular sound of someone crossing a wood floor with purpose. A pause. Then the door opened. The light behind her was warm and gold. The kind of light that falls in photographs of other people's lives. He had a single second of seeing her as a silhouette, tall, slim, dark hair loose around her shoulders, a gray cashmere sweater, and one hand on the doorframe, before she stepped forward, and the porch light fell across her face, and the silhouette became a person. Became her. He stopped breathing. Not as a figure of speech, he actually stopped. His lungs simply declined to operate for a duration that felt much longer than it probably was. The world did the thing it sometimes does when something large and unprocessable arrives. It became very still and very detailed. The wet stones of the path beneath his feet. The sound of the rain on the eaves. The small warm weight of Lily's hand, which she had just been holding and which was now gone because she had stepped past both of them and into the house. Sophia Wentworth. Except she was Sophia something else. Now, the nameplate on the mailbox had said something else. A name he hadn't registered in the moment, but which now seemed important in a way he couldn't articulate. and she was standing in the doorframe of a house that cost more than he would earn in 5 years, and she was looking at him the way you look at something that cannot, by any reasonable chain of events, be where it is. In her hand was a glass. Wine. From the color of what was left in it. The glass was a good one, long-stemmed. The kind that requires a certain kind of life to be ordinary. She was not holding it very well. It fell. Not shattering wine glasses are more resilient than movies suggest, but landing on the wood floor of the entryway with a sound like an exclamation, rolling a half circle on its side, coming to rest against the baseboard, with the dregs spreading in a slow red arc across the pale wood. Neither of them looked at it. He was aware that he should say something. He was aware of the rain on the back of his neck, and the 7 years between this moment and the last time he had stood in front of her, and the specific cruelty of the fact that he had spent 7 years trying to stop thinking about that face, and now here it was, in a doorway, in the rain, looking at him as though he were a ghost that had materialized without the decency to warn anyone. "Jack," she said. A statement, not a question. Not Jack. With the rising inflection of disbelief. Just Jack. The way you say a thing when you're confirming that the world is doing what you think it's doing, and you're not quite ready to decide how to feel about that. His name in her mouth, in that specific low register she had always used for his name, slightly careful, like something she was handling with attention, and something in his chest did something painful and involuntary that he could not have named if asked to. Lily had disentangled herself from his hand and stepped past her mother into the house with the ease of long habit. Dragging his jacket behind her, she had forgotten to give it back, or had elected not to, and the yellow of her raincoat disappeared around the edge of the door, and there was the sound of small feet on wood floors going somewhere warm and lit. "Sophia," he said. A beat. 2 beats. She was still in the doorway. He was still on the step. Between them was the width of a threshold, and approximately 7 years and everything that had happened inside those years that the other person didn't know about, which in their case was quite a lot. "How?" she began, and stopped. "She was at the bus shelter," he said. He kept his voice even with the care of someone handling something fragile and knowing it. "On Mercer. She was alone. I called the police, but they were backed up, and she knew roughly where the house was," she said. "The park with the fountain." "I was driving," Sophia said. Her voice was not quite steady, but it was being held steadily, the way you hold something that wants to slip. "I went the wrong way at the intersection. I was sure she'd be at the shelter, but I couldn't. I circled twice and I couldn't find her. I was about to call, she stopped. She's always at the shelter when I'm a few minutes late. She knows the protocol. But tonight the bus came early, and she'd already left the stop, and She's okay," he said. She was scared, but she's okay. Sophia looked past him at the rain for a moment. Her expression did something complicated and private that he couldn't read from where he was standing. Then she looked back at him, and the expression resolved itself into something more composed, though the composure was clearly recent and effortful. "Come in," she said finally. "Please." The house was warm inside. The way houses are warm, when someone lives in them with intention. Books on the shelves. A child's drawing on the refrigerator, held with magnets. The particular clean order of a household managed by someone who needed control as a way of bearing the world. He remembered that about her. He stood in her kitchen with a mug of coffee she'd made with the automatic, practical hospitality of someone who doesn't know what else to offer, and he tried not to notice how much of her was still recognizable. The way she stood when she was thinking, one arm crossed over her chest, the other raised, fingers touching the side of her face. The way she said his name a second time, softer, once she'd sent Lily upstairs to change out of her wet dress. "Jack," she said again. 7 years, he said. 7 years, she agreed. The coffee was very good. He noticed this because noticing small, concrete things was easier than noticing the way the kitchen light fell across her face, the way she was looking at him as though he were a question she had been trying to answer for a long time. "You live in the city," she said. "East Side. Hillcrest Complex." A pause. He watched her absorb this East Side, maintenance work, and watched her not let her face do anything with it, which was its own kind of response. "You look," she began, and stopped again. "Tired," he offered. "I was going to say the same." He wrapped both hands around the mug. "What happened, Sophia?" She looked at him for a long time, not avoiding the question, measuring it. "The way you measure a jump before you decide whether to take it." "Which part?" she asked. "The part where you disappeared." The word landed between them. She didn't flinch, which he noted. "I didn't disappear," she said carefully. "You left." "I left," he said, "because you told me to." A silence then that was different from the earlier silences, heavier, older. The kind of silence that has been sitting in a room for years, waiting. "I told you to," she said slowly. "Because I thought." She stopped. "Because your brother told me." Another stop. Her jaw tightened. "Because I believed something I shouldn't have believed. And by the time I understood that, you were gone." Jack set down the mug. "What did Nathan tell you?" His brother Nathan was 3 years older, handsome, in a slick and effortless way that had always made Jack feel like an unfinished draft, and possessed of a talent for making the wrong things sound reasonable. Jack had not spoken to Nathan in 5 years. He had not, until this moment in this kitchen, fully understood why. Sophia told him quietly, standing with her arms still crossed and her voice controlled, the way you control your voice when you have been over something so many times in your own head that the telling of it has become almost mechanical. Nathan had come to her 6 months after Jack left, after Jack had left believing, because Sophia had told him so through tears that seemed genuine, that she had met someone else, that she had outgrown what they had, that she needed him to go. Nathan had come to her with a story, that Jack had been with someone, that it had been going on for months, that the leaving had been Jack's escape route, not her cruelty. She had believed him. She had been 27 and heartbroken, and Nathan had been right there with his reasonable voice and his specific, damning details. And she had believed him. But why would Nathan Jack started? "Because I had a trust fund," Sophia said, flatly. "And because he knew that if you and I—" She stopped, rearranged. "Our families knew each other. My father had a business he was going to bring Nathan into if things went a certain way. Nathan needed me to not be attached to you." Jack thought about this, thought about the night Sophia had sat across from him in the apartment on Clement Street and told him, in a voice that didn't waver, that she didn't love him anymore. Thought about how certain she had seemed, how he had walked out believing that certainty was real. "I spent 3 months trying to call you," he said. "I blocked your number. I wrote letters. Nathan intercepted them. I didn't know that until much later." The kitchen was very quiet, rain on the windows. The faint sound of Lily moving around upstairs. "She's yours," Sophia said. He had known this, in the way you sometimes know something before you've processed it consciously, from the moment he'd looked at Lily's face in the bus shelter. Something in the line of her forehead, something in the directness of her gaze, but hearing it said aloud was different. He sat down. He sat down on one of the kitchen chairs and put his hands flat on the table and breathed slowly, because the alternative was something he didn't have words for and didn't want to do in someone else's kitchen. "I didn't know," Sophia said. "Not until 6 weeks after I believed what Nathan said. And then I found out I was pregnant, and I thought—" Her voice thinned. "I thought you had left. I thought you had chosen to leave. I didn't want to, I couldn't." "You could have told me," he said. "I know. You could have, Jack." Her voice broke on his name, just slightly, just at the edges. "I know." She came downstairs 20 minutes later in clean pajamas blue, with small white stars, her hair in 2 uneven pigtails that suggested she'd done them herself. She carried under one arm a stuffed elephant with one button eye replaced by a piece of felt in a slightly different shade. She looked at Jack, who was still sitting at the kitchen table. She looked at her mother, who was standing at the counter with her arms folded and her eyes red at the rims, in a way she'd been trying to keep him from noticing. Lily was 5 3/4. She did not have the vocabulary for what she was observing, but she had the instinct for it, that particular child's instinct for the charged air of adult emotion, the invisible weather that passes between people who have a history. She walked to the table and climbed into the chair across from Jack. She set the elephant on the table between them. "This is Gerald," she said. "He's very old." Jack looked at the elephant. "How old?" "4 years," Lily said, with complete seriousness. "He was there when I was born, basically." Jack nodded. "Gerald," he said, and tipped his chin at the elephant in acknowledgement. Lily studied him the way she had studied him at the bus shelter, that clear, unself-conscious assessment. "Are you going to stay?" she asked. The question was simple. It was also the most complicated thing anyone had asked him in 7 years. He looked at Lily. He looked at Sophia, who had turned from the counter, and was watching him with an expression that was not quite hope and not quite fear, but something suspended between them, something that had been waiting a long time to find out which way it would fall. He thought about the apartment on the east side, the twin bed against the wall, the coffee pot that took 7 minutes to produce something worth drinking, the Saturday overnight shifts and Dennis's sighs, and the particular quality of silence in a room that expects no one. "I don't know yet," he said. It was the most honest thing he had said in months. Lily considered this answer with the gravity it deserved. Then she pushed Gerald toward him, an inch, in the gesture of a child making an offering. "You can hold him," she said, "while you decide." They talked until midnight. Sophia put Lily to bed at 9:30. Jack waited in the kitchen, feeling the particular strangeness of sitting in the domestic interior of a life he hadn't known was his, listening to the muffled sounds of bedtime, the water running, the murmur of voices too low to distinguish, the creak of floorboards, a single small laugh that came through the ceiling and landed in the kitchen like a small bright object, and came back with 2 glasses of wine and the expression of someone who has made a decision about something and is committed to carrying it through. She told him about the years, not in a confessional way, not seeking absolution, but in the even, factual manner of someone sharing a record that needs to exist for its own sake, apart from any judgment it might receive. She'd finished her MBA at Berkeley. She'd started a logistics consulting firm from the ground floor. Just her and a laptop and a sublet office on Market Street, with a view of a parking structure and a lease she could barely cover. And in 4 years it had grown to 11 employees and 3 major clients whose names Jack recognized from the side of trucks. She was good at it. She had always been good at systematic problems, at finding the inefficiency in a system and removing it with the clean, clinical precision of someone pulling a splinter. She was less good, she said, with the kind of humor that costs something to produce, at the other kind of efficiency, the kind that runs in the space between people, the invisible machinery of closeness and distance, and the specific cost of every decision you make about which walls to keep. She'd raised Lily. Alone, she had a nanny 3 days a week, she said immediately and without being asked, as though anticipating a judgment, a woman named Claudette, who was patient and firm, and had raised 3 children of her own, and who Lily called Claudie with the same warmth she gave Gerald, but alone in the way that mattered. The 3 in the morning way. She'd been the one at the school plays and the pediatric appointments and the night terrors at 2 in the morning when Lily was 3, and had gone through a phase of believing there was something specific and hostile living under the bill. She'd sat on the floor of Lily's room for 45 minutes in the dark, her back against the bed frame. Lily's small fingers threaded through her hair, and she had described every single item under the bed, in careful, boring, methodical detail: the laundry basket, the 2 board books, the pair of socks, the dust, the bare wood, until the inventory became a kind of incantation, and Lily fell asleep in the middle of it, her breathing going slow, and even while Sophia sat there in the dark a little longer, listening to the particular sound of her daughter asleep, which was the most important sound she knew. Jack listened. He was aware, as he listened, of a peculiar double sensation. Grief for the years he hadn't been there, and something else. Something that felt, reluctantly and painfully, like recognition, like watching a version of a story you'd been living from the wrong angle, and finally seeing the whole shape of it from above. "I told myself," Sophia said, turning the wine glass in her hand slowly, "that if I could build something that worked, Lily, the company, the house, something with structure that held. If I could make it all function properly and reliably, and without the kinds of gaps that let terrible things happen, I could." She stopped. "I could stop feeling like I'd made the worst mistake of my life." "Did it work?" he asked. She looked at him without any performance, without anything protective in her expression at all, which in his experience was rarer than most people knew. "No," she said simply. "It worked as a thing to do with my hands. It worked as a place to put my energy. It didn't work as a solution to the actual problem, which was that I had believed something untrue about someone I." She stopped, drank. Someone who didn't deserve it. He turned the wine glass in his own hands. "I spent a year being angry," he said. "Not at you, at first. At the situation. At whatever had gone wrong between us, that I couldn't identify. I replayed that conversation about 1,000 times trying to find the thing I'd missed. The signal I should have read. There wasn't one," she said quietly. "I was very careful, I know. I figured that out eventually." He set down the glass. "Then I spent another year deciding I was done being angry. That seemed like a reasonable place to arrive. I worked a lot. I moved twice. I deleted things I should probably have kept, and kept some things I probably should have deleted." He paused. "Then I spent, I don't know, the rest of it trying to figure out who I was, without the version of the future I'd had in my head." The one where he stopped. "The one where what?" she said. He looked at her. "The one where you were in it." The kitchen was very quiet. Outside the window the rain had softened, become something almost gentle. The kind of rain that sounds like it's apologizing. "And," she said, "turns out," he said, "I'm decent at fixing things." She almost smiled. It reached her eyes before it reached her mouth, which was how he had always been able to tell whether her smiles were real. He had cataloged this a long time ago, and hadn't known until this moment that he'd kept the information. "Jack," she said, "I'm not asking you to. I don't expect." "I know," he said. "I just need you to know that it wasn't I never stopped." "I know," he said again. A silence. "Lily already trusts you," Sophia said. "She doesn't trust people quickly. But she trusted you at the bus shelter. I could see it when she came in." She paused. "She has your way of deciding about people. She just looks, and she knows." Jack thought about Lily pushing Gerald across the table. The small, grave offering of a stuffed elephant with one felt eye. "She said her daddy used to fix the door," he said. Sophia went still. "The back door," she said, quietly. "It's been sticking since August. I kept meaning to call someone." She looked at him across the kitchen table with an expression that had become, in the last hour, increasingly unguarded. "I tell her I've always told her that her father was a good man who went away because of things that weren't anyone's fault. I wanted her to grow up without." She stopped. "Without the weight of it. You never told her who." She never asked in a way that needed an answer. "Until recently." Sophia set down her glass. She started asking, about 3 months ago, in the way children do when they're trying to understand something real. I kept thinking I'd figure out how to tell her, and then tonight she went missing and I was driving around in the rain thinking about everything I hadn't done, everything I'd waited too long to. She stopped herself. The rain was quieter now. Not gone, but gentle. Jack looked at the ceiling for a moment, in the direction of where a small girl in star-print pajamas was sleeping with a stuffed elephant and 1 3/4 eyes worth of faith in the world. "The back door," he said. Sophia looked at him. "What kind of stick? Seasonal warp or hinge problem?" She blinked. Then, after a moment, she said, "Hinge, I think. It pulls down on the left side when you open it." He nodded. "Easy fix, 30 minutes. She was looking at him with an expression he didn't entirely know how to read, some compound of disbelief and hope and the particular fragility of someone who has been managing things alone for a very long time and has been asked, without warning, to consider not doing that anymore. "You don't have to," she started. "I know I don't," he said. "But I'd like to see her in the morning. If that's..." He stopped, rearranged. "I'm not asking for anything except that. Just in the morning. And after that we figure out the rest." He found them by accident. He was in the hallway. Sophia had gone to check on Lily, who had cried out once in her sleep, and on the narrow table by the front door there was a wooden box, the kind people keep keys in, and beside it, a stack of envelopes, bound with a rubber band that had perished long ago and was now just a dark ring around the stack. He recognized the handwriting before he recognized anything else about them. His own handwriting. Block caps, slightly cramped, the way it always got when he was writing something that mattered. 8 letters. He stood in the hallway with the stack in both hands and counted them. 8 letters written between October and the following June, all addressed to Sophia at an address on Clemens Avenue that had been her parents' house, all unopened, all bearing, in handwriting that wasn't his, a single word across the front: return. Not return to sender, just return. As though the word were a verdict. He was still standing there when Sophia came back. She saw the letters. She stopped in the middle of the hallway with both hands at her sides, and she looked at the letters, and something crossed her face that was not simple, something composite and deep, and the kind of thing that doesn't have a clean name in any language. Nathan, he said. He had access to their mailbox, she said. Her voice was very quiet. While I was living there, after he had a key because my father trusted him, I never. She stopped. I never thought to question it. Jack looked at the letters. He thought about the man who had written them, 37. Angry, heartsick, writing with the stubborn hope of someone who still believed that if you said the true thing clearly enough, it would reach the person it was meant for. I found them 2 years ago, Sophia said. In a box in my parents' attic when we were clearing it out. I recognized your handwriting from across the room. I knew immediately. Did you read them? Yes. A beat. All of them? Yes. Her voice didn't waver, but her hands, at her sides, were not quite still. I read everyone. And then I sat in my parents' attic for about an hour, and just... She shook her head. I tried to find you. Afterwards. But you'd moved. Your number had changed. Your social media was... I deleted everything, he said. After the first year, I know. She looked at him. I hired someone, actually. An investigator. She found an address on the east side. Hillcrest Complex. A maintenance worker named J. Calloway. But she stopped, breathed. I drove there, twice. I sat outside the building, and I thought about what I would say, and I couldn't. She pressed her fingers to her mouth briefly. I kept thinking that I had no right. That I'd believed Nathan over you. That I had built a whole life, and Lily was 5. And what right did I have to walk into your day? Sophia. She stopped. You had every right, he said. You have every right. He set the letters carefully back on the table. She's my daughter. The words in the air between them. Simple, declarative. The weight of 5 3/4 years compressed into 4 syllables. Sophia's eyes were wet. She didn't try to hide it this time. I know, she said. I know that. I'm not angry, he said. He considered this as he said it, and found it was true, more or less. Or at least true enough for now. Anger was in there somewhere, filed carefully next to grief, and the particular loneliness of a man who had spent years not knowing he had a daughter, who could imitate the sound of a sticking door with perfect accuracy. But the anger was not the loudest thing. How can you not be angry? She asked. I'm working on it, he said. I've gotten pretty good at working on things. He stayed, not in the way of a resolution or a commitment or anything that carried the weight of permanence. They were both too careful for that. Too acquainted with the cost of assumptions. He stayed the way you stay when the rain is still going, and there is coffee, and a kitchen with light in it, and a child who will wake up at 7 and expect breakfast, and some small part of you needs to know what that morning looks like before you can decide about any of the larger things. He slept on the couch. Sophia had offered the guest room she'd set it, with the practical hospitality that was her default mode, the hospitality that doesn't ask anything back, but the couch seemed right, somehow, appropriately provisional, an overnight arrangement rather than a declaration. He lay there in the dark of the living room, with the rain quieter now on the windows, and thought about nothing in particular, and eventually, without meaning to, fell asleep. He woke at 6:45 to the sound of small feet on stairs. Not hurrying, not tentative, the measured, purposeful descent of someone who knows exactly where they are going, and is taking the stairs at a reasonable pace because they have been told, probably more than once, not to run on the stairs. Lily appeared in the doorway of the living room in her star-print pajamas, her hair loose from the pigtails now, a dark cloud around her face. She carried Gerald by one ear, with the casual authority of someone who has never in her life questioned whether she was allowed to be wherever she was. She looked at him on the couch with that direct, unself-conscious gaze he was already beginning to recognize as entirely hers, an expression that evaluated without judgment, that was simply information gathering. He looked back. Neither of them said anything for a moment. "You stayed," she said. "I stayed," he said. She crossed the room with a precise, unhurried tread and climbed onto the other end of the couch. She sat with her legs folded under her, Gerald in her lap, regarding him with the serious expression of someone who has given a matter considerable thought and is now prepared to discuss it. "Mommy cries sometimes," she said. Conversationally, with no preamble, in the tone of someone reporting observable facts about the world. "Not the sad kind. The other kind." "What other kind?" he asked. She tilted her head slightly. He noticed this was a thing she did. This small tilt when she was locating the right words, and said, "The kind you do when something is a lot. When your whole chest gets too full. I do it too." She considered this. When something is very, very good, and you didn't know it was going to happen. He thought about Sophia in the hallway with the stack of letters. The stillness of her. The way her hands had been not quite still at her sides. "Yeah," he said. "I know that kind." Lily nodded, satisfied. She pulled her knees to her chest and looked at the rain on the windows, still going, softer now, the kind of morning rain that falls straight down and has given up any pretense of urgency, just a gray, clean, patient presence. The sky was beginning to lighten at its edges. "Do you know how to make pancakes?" she asked. "I do," he said. She turned to look at him with an expression of concentrated seriousness. "Mom's pancakes have no bubbles," she said. "You have to wait for the bubbles. The surface has to bubble all the way through before you flip." "She doesn't wait. She flips too early and then there." She made a face that required no translation. "Raw in the middle," he said. "Exactly," she said, gratified. "You have to have patience." "I wait for the bubbles," he said. Lily appeared to receive this information and file it in a specific, important place. Then she climbed off the couch with the brisk, purposeful energy of someone who has a clear plan for the morning and has spent enough time on preliminary discussion. She moved toward the kitchen and stopped at the doorway and looked back at him once. "Gerald says you can keep him until you're sure," she said. "He doesn't mind. He's very patient." A small pause. "Like with the pancakes." Jack looked at the stuffed elephant on the cushion beside him. He looked at Gerald's one button eye and one felt eye, and the particular worn quality of something that has been carried everywhere by someone who needed it close. He thought about 7 years of rooms that expected no one. The battery, at 11%. The coffee pot that took 7 minutes, and the Saturday overnight shifts and Dennis's management by Cy, and the way Jack had gotten very good at moving through the world as though he took up exactly as much space as required and no more, no less, like a maintenance worker who does good work and leaves no trace. He thought about Lily's shoulder against his arm at the bus shelter. That small, involuntary lean. The way she had taken his hand with both of hers and not let go. He thought about a door that hadn't been closing right since August. He picked up Gerald and went to the kitchen. Sophia was already there, in a robe, her hair loose, filling the coffee pot with the focused concentration of someone who has not yet fully woken up. She looked up when he came in. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The morning light through the window was the particular pale gold of October. Thin and clean, the rain having washed everything to a fresh transparency. "She says your pancakes have no bubbles," Jack said. Sophia looked at her daughter. Lily, at the kitchen table, was arranging Gerald and 2 salt shakers in what appeared to be a formal meeting of some kind, and did not look up. "My pancakes are fine," Sophia said, with a dignity that was completely undermined by the slight curve at the corner of her mouth. "She's very specific about the bubbles. She is specific about everything." "She gets it from." Sophia stopped. Looked at him. A small, complicated smile, the real kind, eyes first. She gets it from her father. Jack found the flour. Lily directed the salt shakers in their meeting. The coffee pot, which was a good one, took less than 4 minutes. There were things still to navigate, legal things, practical things, the long, careful work of building something from a foundation that had been damaged and needed to be examined before any weight was put on it. There were conversations ahead that would not be easy. There was Nathan, somewhere, who would need to become a chapter that ended rather than continued. There was the question of what Jack's days would look like. And Lily's, and whether a child who was 5 3/4 could understand, over time, the particular shape of what had happened, and who her father was, and who she was to him. There were all of these things, but they were future things. And the morning was a present thing. And the present thing was a kitchen filling with the smell of coffee, a little girl conducting a solemn conference between a stuffed elephant and 2 salt shakers, and a man who had spent 7 years being quietly, thoroughly alone, standing at a stove with a bowl and a whisk, watching the surface of the batter for the moment it began to breathe. He waited for the bubbles. They came. There are doors that close on a Tuesday in October and don't open again for 7 years. You don't plan for this. You don't plan for any of it, not the rain or the bus shelter or the little girl in the yellow coat who takes your hand and won't let go. You plan for the ordinary things. The faucets and the light fixtures and the hinge that pulls down on the left side when you open it. But some doors, you come to understand, were never really closed. They were just waiting for the right person to knock.